Welcome to the Manifestation Method. I'm your host, Ayelet Polonsky, therapist, coach, and Jewish neo-shaman. Here we blend the wisdom of psychology, spirituality, and Kabbalah to empower you with tools for living your most authentic life, filled with love, abundance, and healing. Through somatic, narrative, and hypnotherapy, I've developed the manifestation method to guide your soul's transformation and the realization of your true self. Let's rise together. To dive deeper into manifesting your most authentic life, visit ayeletpolonsky.com. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Manifestation Method podcast. Today, we have the honor of welcoming Dani Beinstein. Did I say that right? Beinstein?
Yeah, you did.
Beinstein. She is a gifted psychological astrologer. I'm really curious to hear what that means. She's a writer and she's a guide whose work is deeply rooted in the exploration of the human condition. Dani's journey is one of profound self-inquiry, transformation, and ultimately surrendering to her true calling. She's a graduate of NYU with a degree in humanities. Dani spent nearly a decade immersed in the fast-paced world of media, politics, and modern culture in both New York and LA. But despite the external success, she found herself at a crossroads, seeking something deeper, something more aligned with her soul's purpose. That search led her to pursue a master's in spiritual psychology, followed by an intensive study in consciousness, health, and healing. Through this immersive work, Dani not only transformed her own inner landscape, but also developed the wisdom and intuitive abilities to guide others towards self-awareness, clarity, and alignment. Her approach is rooted in compassionate listening, deep presence, and the understanding that we all seek belonging, love, and purpose, no matter our backgrounds or life paths. Dani reminds us that there's no final destination in personal growth, only the ongoing journey back home to ourselves. So join us as we dive into Dani's insights on intuition, self-worth, and interconnectedness that binds us all. I know when I first saw Dani's picture on Instagram, because my team was like, we have to have her on the pod, the first thing I thought to myself was, wow, she looks so genuine. She looks so authentic. Like there's no agenda, and I really just want to get to know her. So I'm so excited. Welcome, Dani Beinstein.
Thank you for having me. That's quite an intro. I hope I can live up to that. That's like, I call it.
No pressure. And also, Dani and I had a little bit of like a 15-minute schmooze before I press record. And so I'm pretty confident that you just being you will be more than enough. So that's all we're expecting here.
Well, I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks. Amazing. So, Dani, you've spent years helping people navigate their lives through astrology. For someone who's new to astrology, where should they start? What should they look at? I know we hear the word birth chart, placements. That gets really confusing. Like, where does a beginner start?
It's really information heavy and very technical. So it can feel really overwhelming once people start unpacking all of it. And so that's why I always say start with the lunar cycles. Start with the new moons and the full moons and start to connect with how you feel during those times, but also to the astrology of them. So a new moon occurs every roughly 28 and a half days. It's the beginning of the lunar cycle. And it's when the sun and the moon are at the exact same sign at the exact same degree. And then roughly 2 weeks later, we have a full moon where the sun and the moon are opposite, 180 degrees apart. Each one of those has a unique snowflake imprint. Each one of those new and full moons. And that's a great entry point because there is, first of all, the added benefit of living in connection with the cycles, right? Like if you look at the Hebrew calendar, it's lunar. Most of the major holidays are, line up with the lunar calendar, but it's a way to connect deeply with the cosmos sounds so cheesy, but with the cosmos, and recognize how we are all part and connected to a greater unfolding web. And because each of the new moons and full moons is in a sign and has a kind of imprint, it's a great way to start to understand and then understand where it falls in your chart. So that's where I always say to start, because the sun and the moon are kind of the backbone of astrology. They're the core kind of celestial bodies, what we call the luminaries.
So interesting. It's reminding me of the time I lived in India for 6 years, and so
Where?
so a place called Bidadi outside of Bangalore.
Okay. I've
It
never
was in
been
an
to India. It's very hot. In an ashram.
At an ashram. I had a guru. I was a
Yeah.
direct disciple of the guru and was traveling the world spreading his teachings. It was a
Yeah.
real big. It was 6 years, and then I had this intuitive nudge, this download that said, "Get up and go to Israel." And I spent 8 years in Israel. But
How
in
old
India,
were you? Can I ask, how
I
old were
was
you when you were there?
yeah, I was 22. When I got to India, I was 22, and it came after the loss of a friend of mine who she died in a motorcycle accident, and that was like my huge existential awakening or my
Yeah.
spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
And but I feel like something about India was very weaved into past lives for me. Like I was
Yeah.
always meant to be there to live out some sort of karmic cycle in this lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And so they were very big on like Vedic astrology. And so
Yes.
they would, right? So they would
Yes.
ask for my birth time, my location, what else? Birth time, location, and yeah, that was it, right? Birth time, location.
Birth
Anyways,
time, location, time.
time.
Birth
Yeah,
time, date, year, time, and location.
there you go. There you go. That's what it was. I'm curious how accurate these readings are. Like
Well, yeah, sorry, tell me. What were you going to say?
because I remember reading, they like printed out a whole pamphlet just based on my reading. And I remember reading it. I guess this is a two-part question for you. I remember reading it and feeling like, wow, this feels really accurate. I'm wondering if anybody would read this and feel like it was accurate to them, or if there's really something specific in here for me. So I'm like, how accurate is it? And how does it get so accurate? A, and B, how seriously should I be taking the information, right? Because I remember growing up opening like a Vogue magazine, let's say, going to the back to the astrology page, and it's like, you're going to experience such and such this month, and it can be good or bad. And so it's kind of like, I felt like boxed me into a right? So
Yes.
so I'm curious how accurate are they, and how seriously should we take it?
So first, it's important for me to say I practice Western astrology, right? And that's because my orientation is Western, right? So Western resonates with me. I don't practice Vedic astrology. As I understand it, it's almost like, it's like with anything, it's like different words for the same thing. Like I think their signs are like a sign ahead than Western astrology. But as I also understand it, Vedic astrology is more about predetermination, meaning looking at fate, looking at, what is meant to occur in your life. I'm Western. So I believe more in free will. But I believe, kind of like the ancient Greeks did, that it's a blend, meaning that there's certain things that our souls are meant to experience here, souls were meant to encounter, experiences were meant to have, that are opportunities and challenges for growth, right? So my work is not about this is going to happen to you. My work is the energy is concentrated here, or this is your default patterning. How are you utilizing it? Because the point of understanding astrology is also understanding our ability to transcend it. To a point, we are mortal, right? There are mortal lessons we are here to learn for our souls to metabolize. But my work is more, let's say if you're having a significant Saturn transit, Saturn takes 28 and a half years to go in the zodiac and deals with physical real world reality. If you're having a Saturn transit, I will look at, okay, what is the opportunity here? What are you being called into? Because Saturn is about maturation, also personal responsibility. Where and how are you avoiding responsibilities in this area? How can you take on and grow? Not over responsibility, but personal responsibility. So my work is more therapeutic. So it looks at the astrological transits, then what we call the natal chart, progressions, which is kind of like evolutionary astrology. So what are we going to do with it? How is our level of consciousness meeting this moment? It's like, I'll give you a very, very basic example. Two different people can receive a parking ticket on the exact same day. Based on the emotional energy, the ideas, the perceptual reality they're bringing to that ticket will change the experience of the ticket. Right? So same thing with the transit. How are we holding it? How are we holding these opportunities? Because a lot of feedback I get, or not feedback, but a lot of people will say, should I be scared? Well, let's unpack that. Why do you feel scared? What about life itself scares you? Because life is unpredictable. And life is going to bring all kinds of opportunities and challenges and curveballs. So if you're saying to me, should I be scared? What you're saying is, should I be scared of life? And why is that? What is that orientation that's leading you towards a fear-based reality? Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Ooh, totally. It even gives me chills. So it sounds to me that understanding one's personal astrology can help them align with their highest potential and help them make empowered choices based on where they're placed in their chart. Is that accurate?
Yes. And also, astrology is also can reveal to us our default archetypal patterning, but it's also an opportunity to say, oh, this is my default. Where is the higher expression? Where is the shadow of it? And we all have all the signs within us. We actually have them all within us. They're all in our natal chart. Where is their medicine? Let's say, so a stellium is when you have 3 or more planets in the same sign or same house. So sometimes I'll say the medicine is in the opposite sign or house, right? Even if what we call that house is empty, doesn't have default energy.
Because that would be in their shadow? Is that what you mean? Like the medicine is there because that's
not
their
even
shadow?
It's like, no, it's like, here's an example. Let's say we go to work out at the gym, right? And let's say our default is like, I'm great at squats. I'm just going to keep doing squats because I'm great at it and it comes so easily. I don't have really strong glutes and thighs. Meanwhile, arms are like, I don't want to do arms. That's painful. But if you actually engage the arms, you build strength and you balance out. I mean, working out is not my expertise. I do work out, but it's not but do you see what I'm saying? Like, just because we don't have default energy there doesn't mean the core energy isn't available. It just may take a little bit more to move into it, but it's also our medicine.
Understanding is that astrology can help a person look at the places where they can grow and develop.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Exactly.
Okay.
And where
amazing.
are we resistant? Where are we like, I'll see a chart that has a very serious and sober quality to it, which has its benefits, but that individual may need to engage more in play. Right? So, let's say they're having a child. It's like, then that child is an opportunity, given the child's energy, to possibly engage in play in a new way, in wonder.
I love that. Okay, now I know a lot of people are listening and thinking, okay, there's that meme going around, wow, we made it through 2025 and it's only been January, right?
Yeah.
It's like, like January, there were fires in LA. There was just a lot of big cataclysmic shifts happening. So I think a lot of us are wondering, as 2025 I find is kind of shaping up to be a catalyst year for collective change. From an
Yes.
astrological perspective, what should we be aware of? Are you able to tell us what's coming?
Yeah, so it's barely even begun because so we have been in for a very long time now in heavy earth and water in the outer planets. So the outer planets move more slowly, and so they're more generational, taking from 12 years to grow in the zodiac to 248 years to grow in the zodiac, depending, right? There's Jupiter, there's Saturn, there's Uranus, there's Neptune, there's Pluto. So each of those takes a certain amount. The energy has already started to shift to air. Starting in the spring, deeper in the spring, we're going to have a real movement into fire. And the shift overall is going to be into fire and air. So that means less processing, or quicker processing, I should say. More
I like
action, more
Okay.
instinct, right? And the feeling of time and change accelerating. So if we think about fire in a ritualistic sense, it's a purifier, right? And air is conversational, it's intellectual, it's also social. So we've been in a more earth, which is pragmatic and more dense, and water, which is more emotional. And we are shifting into fire and air. So it depends on the individual and how that energy affects their energy. But the change is really just beginning.
Okay.
That's just the reality, right? There's no going back. So it's kind of like and this is again, like, how do we relate to change? Because people say they want change, and then change comes and people go, no, not like that.
Right.
I don't want that like that. I don't want it
Right.
like that. But we don't get to choose.
Well, I wonder what that means in terms, because I find that there's like this divide, right? Where there's the light workers, there's the people who are dedicated to growth and healing and transformation. And then there's people who are just kind of living in the same old pattern and routine, right? They're not interested in entering into that new paradigm way of living and thinking. So this shift that we're going into, where processing just happens more quickly and like time is accelerating, what does that mean for those who are not entering into the new paradigm consciousness?
So this is a really great question, because I think that in some ways that's an illusion or a fallacy. Meaning, the example I give is, you could have a janitor who is more evolved than a light worker with 100,000 followers on Instagram, right? So
Totally.
what something looks like on the outside versus what it is, right? And I've met many people in the spiritual community who also don't like change, who also are resistant to change. They may speak about acceleration, but I'm very careful to divide people in that way. I think it's more about our relationship to change, meaning that if we are a person who accepts that the only constant in life is change, whether we are working a corporate job and say, okay, I don't expect to be here for more than 6 months. I don't expect to be here for more than a year, right? It doesn't have to mean what they, do for a living or how they hold themselves. It's direct and practical relationship to the upending of your reality. Which is not as easily discerned by external metrics or labels, right? So for those who, like some people, are having a very, very hard time with the political landscape in America, some people are overjoyed.
Right.
Right? Same reality, different perception. So again, it's like how we relate to the issue is the issue. So to me, the highest mark of a spiritual individual is humility in my perceptual reality. Meaning, I don't know. I don't know. We'll see, right? That openness. So those that hold on to any kind of formula for life, no matter what the career or what the external, that is going to be the person who is going to be most challenged in the coming years.
Oh, that so resonates. You know,
Right?
as someone who, like, I moved to America just a year ago, and this is after living in India for 6 years and then Israel for 8 years.
Yeah.
So even though I'm born and raised in America, needless to say, I was not attuned to the political climate here in America for many years. And I get here and I get thrown into the political debates. And I'm someone who I am in many different eclectic circles and communities. And, you know, I kind of came as this like blank slate, you know, I came to America as like in general, I take the same perception as you, which is like I try to zoom up and above sides, right and wrong, right, good or bad. And I just try to find the truth in what each side is sharing. Right? Because they're both right at the end of the day, you know? And once we get into this like dichotomous thinking, like you said, we kind of get trapped and it just doesn't feel good in my system. And so it just really, really resonates when you say that for these people who are really taking one side versus the other. And like, you know, I found in my friend groups, because I was kind of just an open vessel or canvas, they imposed their views on me, trying to get me to decide one way or the other. These people who are very one-sided, when you say they're, I don't remember how you phrased it, like in trouble, or they're, you know, what do you mean by that, and what can they do to
so
get
I don't mean in trouble, and I'm even saying separate from politics. I'm saying that our relationship to things being in status quo, or the need for things to be in status quo, is going to be challenged. So not so much like, oh, you believe this politically, or you believe this politically, or, you know, it's more that our relationship to, no, this is how things have to be. Anytime we fight with reality, we lose. And I mean reality with capital R, right? And the master addiction is control. So a lot of people who were feeling very much empowered and in control are no longer feeling empowered and in control. If you take the fires, for example, if people were never assumed in, like, you know, an enclave like the Palisades, where I spent a lot of time, you know, extremely affluent, you know, community, that something like this would happen, you're going to be thrown. Right? But if you've moved through your life where, without having a jacked up nervous system, but just a reality that nothing is guaranteed, that everything is an unknown, it is going to be easier to move through the accelerated rate of change.
Yeah. I agree 100%.
right? So it's more like, I mean, this gets to a much deeper thing, but I think a lot of what's underneath all of it, well, control is the master addiction, right? And feeling the need to be right, and the right, and that feeling of being in the indignation of like, I know I'm right, which is the ego, right?
Oof.
Rather than the humility of, I don't know, let's see, and let's, let me just be a decent human being day to day in my interactions and do what I can do, But I think that's where, so Pluto takes 248 years to grow in the zodiac. Pluto is a bit of a wrecking ball, but it strips everything bare. So Pluto just moved into Aquarius in November. And the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was both the American and the French revolutions. It's very similar energy, right? That we are experiencing. The other thing is that Aquarius is the sign of fixed ideology, right? Oof. And it's also the sign of innovation, technological advance, right? Obviously, at the beginning of, astrology, these were very like irrigation then it moved on to things like shipbuilding. Then it just continued to evolve. But innovation, our relationship to technology, our relationship to the social collective, all of that between now and into 2044 is going to undergo a literal revolution.
In what way?
Well, there's going to be a stripping down of it and a challenging of it. So how we relate to Aquarius within our own consciousness and in our own psyche, and then some of us who have strong Aquarian energy are going to be deeply impacted by this long transit. Now, it takes a long time. It's going to be there for nearly 20 years. So it depends on when it hits our personal energy. But there is going to be a real reckoning around fixed ideology in any way, shape, or form.
That excites me. That excites me a bit. Like, we're ready for that.
Yes. So again, it's how are we a person who lives by a rigid formula? And there's a difference between being principled and being ideological. Right? So that's just like one of the many things, our relationship to technology, right? AI is the conversation right now in many, communities. That is a Pluto and Aquarius thing. So it's less about, this side, that side. It's more about our relationship. This is what I was getting to. Pluto is death and rebirth, ultimately. All of this, our attachment to the way things are, or to the way things need to be, stems from our relationship to death.
I'm feeling that.
I know it's not like a light subject, but it really does. And our relationship to death, to the death of the ego, right? There's this idea that you die many times, but you only die really once. And that's when your ego dies, right? But our relationship to our mortality, being in physical form and then no longer being in physical form, is at the root of all of it.
Yes.
I really believe that because it's the ultimate unknown.
Yeah. And someone like me, who I've been on like a 20-year inner growth trajectory, right? Like the idea of like ego death, or we'll call it like identity dissolution, really intrigues me. And when I hear the word death, and for those listening who are like, death, right? What from my perspective, I'm dabbling whether or not the ego ever really dies. I feel like the ego is very necessary because it protects us in many ways.
While living. Incarnated.
Oh, that's what you mean. Yes.
I mean that we only, meaning we come back many lifetimes, but we only really die when we finally surrender the ego. Could be 100 lifetimes, that is a line of thought. you cannot dissolve the ego while being incarnated. I don't think that's possible.
I agree. I agree. It's just
Yeah.
it's par and parcel to our makeup, and it's an
Yeah.
important part to
Yeah.
our makeup, right? So when I think
Yes.
death,
Yes.
I think of like in my lifetime, in these 120 years that please God I
Right.
have, right? I think of it as my I think of it as my ego evolving constantly.
Yes.
Right? And kind of constantly being in this dynamic of questioning the meaning making that I'm attaching
Yeah.
to things that I'm holding on to, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So it sounds to me like that's this wave that we're stepping into, is like recreating our meaning making in a big way, right?
Yes. And it may not be fully conscious, meaning it may not be fully intentional, but it's part of, and obviously, I am not Pollyanna about human nature. I think that evil exists. I think that there is a spectrum of human nature within us. And I do not subscribe to this belief that there is utopia on earth, because I think the point of being on this plane is to work material out. Like, I think Shakespeare kind of nailed it. It's like we're all just players on a stage, and we gain consciousness the more we, yes, are conscious of our identity and can see it for what it is, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not easy work, and not every soul is meant to do that work, and doesn't mean that soul isn't evolved either in a different kind of way, right? Or isn't playing that role. So I think it's all a lot messier than we want it to be. And I think
messy.
That's, I would say, at least here in America or in the West, post World War II, maybe even post communist, right? So let's say like the 90s were kind of a peak feeling of post history. Like, things were just copacetic now. They were going to be okay. And we are now living in a massively historical era. And I think a lot of people think somehow they're immune to the winds of history. And we're not. And like, as someone who loves history and spends a lot of time learning about history and is a lover of great literature, that's very clear, but a lot of people don't realize that. They like, especially in this modern era, and Google, it should all just work. It should all just be copacetic. It should all just be, no. And that's not the era that we are in.
Says who, right? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Says who.
And
that is, and I don't say,
right. Says,
yeah. And I don't say
go
that
ahead.
to scare. It's just a reality. And one can bury their head in the sand and say, oh, I'm not going to be impacted because of X, Y, and Z. No, you're mortal. Mm-mm. You are bound to the laws of mortality, just like and there is a come down to that. There is a grief, especially those that have been raised to think, no, anything is possible. Maybe.
Yeah.
But I think that it's working with that. Now, the flip side of that, the flip side of moments of great historical change and chaos, is what's birthed from it.
Yeah. Yep.
Enormous creative expression, innovation, and people will continue to fall in love. They will continue to have babies. They will continue to find things that are meaningful, to, creatively express. This is what it means to be human. Yeah. But I just think we have moved so far in the direction of control. If I do this, then I get this. And that is already being blasted away. There are no guarantees.
Yeah. Yep. I want to come back to something you said around your belief that utopia doesn't exist on Earth because we are mortal beings and we're susceptible to.
I think there's pockets. I think that there are probably really beautiful pockets on this Earth. But all of
For sure.
humanity?
No. But my question is from a Kabbalistic, from a, let's say, Jewish
Yeah.
perspective, right? There's
Yeah.
history, and which is really like God's story, right? God's
Yeah.
story where,
Yeah.
let's say, God created the cosmos with a end result in mind. And there's a
Yeah.
Kabbalistic phrase that says "Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila," which translates to the end result is wedged in the initial thought. And so
Yeah.
that the premise of that symbolizes that when the creator created the cosmos, God had a final destination in mind, which is this ultimate utopia, heaven on earth paradigm. So I'm with you in that right here, right now, we're in the we're
Like,
in the
look
trenches.
around the earth. Yes, this is not in the immediate, in our lifetimes. I don't
Now,
believe this
according
is
to
in our lifetimes.
astrology, okay, I hear that,
Yeah.
and according to astrology, do you foresee that as a destination for mankind eventually?
That's a interesting question. I'm not sure it's compatible with human nature. I think there will always be avarice and greed, and I'm not a pessimist. I am an optimist, and evil. And so I'm not sure I believe that in this incarnation, in human form as we are right now. So but here's what I am certain about. Telling everybody else what to do to be a better person is not the way there. The way there is if everybody looks inside of themselves and wrestles with, you know, the like the Native American story, the good wolf and the bad wolf within them. But it's not about dictating to other people, this is what it means to be good. I think that's the fastest way to go in the other direction. Because that is an unresolved projection within oneself.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Whew. Okay, it's so
Also,
interesting. It's so interesting. Yeah.
I think it's also can be a way to avoid the challenges of being human. Meaning, if one is always focused, this is very Aquarian though, if one is always focused about what is happening 50 years, 100 years from now, down the line, and you are a human and you are incarnated, what is the state of your current relationships? Is every single relationship in your life in harmony? Because they're all, expressions of yourself or mirrors into yourself. So I think that I think that it misses the point. Like if we all work outward in like concentric circles, right? Like in Catholic theology, there's a term, ortus amoris, which is like there's a natural hierarchy to love, right? It starts with love of God, and then it's like outward, then your family. If you are putting the love of someone out there over there that you don't even have to engage with, over the challenge and natural work and effort it takes to maintain relationships in your life, why does that make you a better person? I mean, these are like really challenging questions to wrestle with in our age where everyone seems to be focused on everything out there. Like I think about, it was very cool, let's say in my 20s and, for people to be really involved in pet causes around the globe. And I would always say, but 7 miles away from you, people are starving. Why don't they matter?
Right. Or you're fighting with your spouse under your own roof.
Exactly. So that to me is like, it's very clear to me that when people are constantly obsessed with things that they have actually no control over. It is a way in which there is pain within themselves that they are not addressing.
Yes, I hear that. I definitely hear that. I wonder though if this, if focusing one's attention on this like messianic, utopic paradigm where there's like redemptive consciousness in everyone and everybody perceives God, and let's just say it might take some divine intervention for that to even occur, right? Because I'm with you, like is in this paradigm, I can't foresee it, but um, you know, I see this a lot. I happen to be Jewish, so I see this a lot in Jewish circles where it's like people are living that life now in order to draw it closer, which is a manifestation perspective as well. It's right. It's like,
That's it.
let me be a
That's
good person
the only,
now. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the only way. But you can't tell me that evil doesn't exist on this planet and that people are very far from that. So to say that that is going to happen the planet over, that doesn't seem viable. That's what I'm saying. The only thing we can do is build within our communities and outward from there.
100%. 100%.
That's it.
Now a little bit more. I agree. I agree. And I have like a little bit more of a practical question now. We're going because these are big, important, big and important.
I was I was a philosophy grad. I could part tell. Of my humanities
like
was philosophy.
You have the philosophy, you have the history, you have the astrology. You're just like an encyclopedia. Like I feel like we could be here for 3 hours, but for time's sake, and I don't know that anybody wants to listen to a 3-hour podcast, but just thinking about the next few months, or let's say till the rest of this year, right? For people who are creatives like myself, right? I'm a mover, I'm a shaker, I'm coming up with projects. I'm constantly, my mind is always like, okay, what can I come up with next? And I love living in that realm. But I know that if I push myself too hard and I'm not aware of what is happening astrologically, I might experience burnout, right? And so I'm for people who are looking to start a new project or start a new job or take, start a business, whatever. How can we map out the next few months in order to have self-care and prioritize alignment, and just see that the most successful outcome comes of it?
Right. So right now, and really into early April, we are in heavy retrograde zone. So Mars, which is the planet of action and agency, Mars went retrograde on December 6th, and it's retrograde until February 23rd. I'm not sure when this is going out. And then a week later, Venus, which is about attraction and values and relationships and finances, that goes retrograde until April 12th. Once we get into mid-April, and we're on the other side of eclipse season, because the eclipses are March 13th and March 29th. And then we also have a Mercury retrograde in there starting in mid-March. So there's a lot of movement happening. And I do think Mars going direct will help, but I think more information, I think we have to engage with the world, engage and move forward. And we may get course correcting feedback. Once we're in mid-April, there's kind of like a launch, an energetic launch.
Wow, interesting. It's really interesting. We're actually launching a new branch of the manifestation method. We were going to do it April 1st as the launch date, but as I'm hearing you speak, I'm wondering if April 12th would be a more effective time to just because we've been doing all the behind the scenes stuff now. So I'm wondering if April 12th is a good launch date.
Well, I'd have to look at your exact chart and the energy, but collectively, by the time we're in mid-April, we're in a different landscape.
Interesting. Well, I'm definitely going to book a session with you if you do privates, and for anybody else listening, if you
that is the bulk of my work. nothing satisfies me like my one-on-ones. Like it is just deep, it's really deep work, especially my clients that I work with over time, So yes, there's going to be an acceleration. March 30th, Neptune, which takes 164 years to grow in the zodiac, that shifts into Aries, begins its move into Aries. May 24th, Saturn moves into Aries. That's a big deal. So that's the shift from water, Pisces, to Aries. Also, Pisces is endings, Aries is beginnings. July 7th, Uranus, which takes 84 years to grow in the zodiac and deals with change and disruption in a neutral way, but definitely change. That moves into Gemini on July 7th. We have a lot of shifts that are upcoming. And it's really exciting if we engage it in that way.
Yes.
It's like all kinds of new possibilities open up. And there's a real kind of like starter energy. Like, meaning we're going to, those of us who are tapped into it, who are less afraid of it, have the opportunity to tap into like, I'm going to try this and see what happens. I'm going to learn about myself through the process.
Oh, that's really exciting for me and for everyone listening. It's just, I just want to like bless you with the perspective to just like open yourself up to the different possibilities and allow yourself to receive the divine lessons and messages that come through all these waves, right? Because there's so much potency here
so
for
much.
us, right?
So much.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, this episode was loaded. I'm almost like tempted to see, with people like you, I'm like, I think there's going to be a part 2 for that. I think we left our listeners with a lot of juicy information.
Yeah.
Dani, are there any last things? Is there any last words you'd like to say to kind of leave us with a perspective of hope going into the rest of 2025?
Yeah, I think as if we are willing to let go of how we think things need to be, there is nothing but possibility in how things can unfold in front of us.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And where can our listeners find you?
Instagram, website, Substack, all of that's on my website. And yeah, I consistently release new sessions available on my calendar for people to work with me.
Amazing. All right. So we'll put all those links in our show notes, everyone. Dani, thank you so much for coming on. It was a real pleasure getting to know you. And I have a feeling this is the beginning of a friendship. So I'm excited for it. Yay.
Thank you so much for having me. Such a joy.
My pleasure. Okay. Thank you for joining me on the Manifestation Method. I hope today's episode has inspired you on your journey to authenticity and abundance. Remember, your transformation begins with your mindset. If you're ready to take the next step, visit ayeletpolonsky.com for more resources and guidance. Until next time, here's to your rising.